Greetings, dear friends. I present to your attention the most common malfunctions and breakdowns that occur on the BMW E46. Even an expensive trashki looks good, but only in the photo or if you don't get close. A neat, even shine and the absence of peeling areas create the illusion of a sturdy body, but any close inspection will easily destroy a present image. Alas, almost all cars will have a lot of bugs and swelling of paint, which usually already represent through holes. Normal galvanizing is not enough for the car. Yes, a gray layer is sometimes visible on the chips, like a normal galvanized metal, but it does not last long. There are plenty of problem areas. It rotates the hood along the bottom of the beak, the front fenders along the axe, mainly from the inside, and along the bumper, and also at the attachment point of the mudguard. The front doors corrode along the edges under the sealant, especially underneath where the rearview mirror is installed. The seals collapse under the plastic of the lining and at the rear axe, and at the front. The process affects the front fender, and the reason is quite obvious. Wet dirt collects under the plastic. The leading edge of the roof against the glass is greeted with rusty chips. The rear fenders are peeling along the arc, along the bumper, and under the tail lift. And of course the trunk lid from the license plate niche and along the lower edge rusts. On inexpensive cars, serious corrosion can be at all problem points, and cars from Moscow, St. Petersburg, and from the northern regions can have visible foci of rust, even if they are copies of the last years of production and are at the top of the market. You just need to take a closer look. Sometimes bend the plastic door seals and moldings. Cars from the southern regions may have relatively whole bodies. Sometimes there are even options in their native paint, but most of them have a decent appearance. This is the result of the tireless work of painters to eliminate problems. As soon as the market price decreases and people start to save money on the car, all the next painters do their job badly. The troika begins to slowly but surely turn into ruin. If you do not take a car in a very cheap configuration, the quality of the interior trim is very good. Nice materials, very nice design. Except that the wear resistance of the steering wheel is low. By the way, they managed to install the steering wheels from more recent models. Do not be surprised if instead of the native malfunction steering wheel there is a free spoke from the E90. In cars with a coupe and convertible body, the sidewalls of the seat are very worn out, but here it depends more on the size of the driver and accuracy. The wear of buttons and handles is very moderate for such runs. Cars that have passed less than 200,000 units. The wear resistance of most elements is still premium here. The dashboard is good for everyone, but in the most common versions, no buttons break with which they reset the odometer. Switch the models of the onboard computer and set the clock. Often on the E46, the devices are not native. They are taken from more powerful versions, from the M3 with black centers and thick arrows. The rings are repainted. The light may not be on. However, more often the tidy is trivially removed in order to drain the LEDs of the arrow signaling devices or to wind up the mileage. The electrics of this generation of BMW cars are quite advanced and complex, and there is enough trouble with it, but it is mainly due to the operation of the ASR, ABS, ECU units and their sensors. In particular, lambda probes on N series and M54 engines and all engine wiring. Failure of lighting elements and body elements is most often associated with flooded wiring, broken wires in the corrugations, and failures of buttons or blocks. But a common problem with the sound amplifier is overload and wear of the speakers. The entire set of control units, from the light unit, dashboard and climate control to EVWS and DME or DDE is stitched here. When replaced, they require binding, and an illiterate electrician can do a lot of things by turning off security systems. Please also know that owners often do not have the opportunity to buy a unit in exactly the same version that they had before, and unit breakdowns are happening more and more often. The service life of capacitors and power switches is suitable. In general, the electrical is quite reliable. It does not cause much trouble if there is no intervention in the system. There is no crookedly installed additional equipment and the generator is in order. Here, even the cable from the battery in the trunk is reliable, because it passes inside the body and is successfully divorced, so the contacts do not burn anywhere. If the E46 hasn't rotated yet, there are two news, good and bad. The good news are that it can be saved to travel for several years, maybe more. The bad thing is that you need to invest an anti-corrosive or prepare to ride to the slaughter. The rest against the background of the body, in general, little things. Some investments in the electrics with the search for suitable blocks are inevitable, as well as the search for disassembly accessories. But when you bought a 20-year-old BMW, you did not expect to drive it as basically as you did on the new Solaris. In the next part, we will consider the chassis, boxes and motors of the E46. The mechanical part of the brake system is exemplary. The main thing is not to try to change component-wise elements for improvement ones. In front, there are simple single-piston calipers, even on the M3. The difference with the civilian versions is only in the size of the disc rotors and the mounting bracket. Behind there are always disc brakes, differing again at diameter, plus ventilated discs on the most powerful modifications. The caliper is just as simple and reliable with a floating caliper. If you do not pour the wrong lubricants on the seals of the guides and on the anthers, then everything will last for a long time, and replacements are limited to consumables, rubber bands and fingers. Unless, of course, the disc did not work after getting into a puddle. The parking brake is implemented with drum pads inside the disc brake rotor and is very reliable, although it is not all designed for drift loads. It should also be borne in mind that the adjustment mechanism on the cable is not the main one here. The main adjustment is done with a small ratchet through a hole in the rotor, which the garage service usually does not know and tightens the cables. On machines of the first years of production, it is worth monitoring the condition of the pipelines, where pipe corrosion is more the rule than the exception. If the body is rotten, then almost certainly the brake pipes also need to be replaced. Front wheel hoses crack with age but do not swell, so the problem is difficult to see if you are not aware of it. ABS sensors rarely fail, but this kind of problem also happens. Fortunately, they are here separately and easily. From the point of view of technology, BMW suspension is simple, but sensibly tuned. It is both comfortable and good steering, even the basic versions allow you to enjoy every meter traveled. It is interesting that the nobility of manners does not disappear even when almost all elements are replaced with non-original ones and with runs over 400,000. Here the E46 looks favorably against the background of modern cars, which are too dependent on the subtleties of coordinating the elastic characteristics of the elements. And here, no unnecessary knocks, no swinging, until everything completely dies. However, there are enough cons, so the resource of the front ball is about 40 to 50,000 kilometers. On rear-wheel drive cars, of which most they are non-replaceable, pressing into an aluminum lever is not recommended, although possible. On four-wheel drive cars, the levers are steel and the ball is officially replaceable there. Rear suspension bushings, especially the lower wishbone, the M3 has a ball joint, it is also a floating bush, and the trailing arm bushings also do not last long, especially in station wagons, where the load on the rear suspension is high in statics. Few people manage to drive more than 50 to 70,000 kilometers even on original paths, and if they put a non-original and even make mistakes with the choice of the installation angle, then repairs every 30,000 is already a good indicator. It can break even more often. It happens that wear and tear occurs after 5 to 10,000. Attempts to increase the resource of the trailing arm silent block often end either with the installation of washers, which reduce the load on the silent block and increase its resource, or with the installation of a part from M3, in which the compliance is slightly less and the rubber cracks less. But both options lead to a change in the nature of the car's behavior. In the first case, it is less controlled. In the second, the transmission of small irregularities to the body increases greatly, and comfort decreases. True, many owners have been driving for years with exfoliated rubber bands, since the knocks are mildly expressed, and under normal loads the car behaves like a living thing. The rods or the stabilizers are consumable, and the bushings of the stubs do not live long here either. A lot of troubles are added by knocks due to wear of the silent blocks of the subframes, the rail mounts and corrosion of the cage nuts of the subframes. The biggest problem with the rear suspension is the point of attachment of the shock absorber to the body and the shock absorber support. The original support with a regularly tightened shock absorber rod serves for a year, after which it begins to knock unpleasantly when the suspension moves on rebound. If you tighten the support strongly by making a space on the shock absorber rod, then the shock absorber mounting point will simply break off, even if you install a reinforcing plate. We'll have to repair the body already, and even if the attachment point does not break, but simply bends, then after a year or two the shock absorber will still fall into the sealant due to corrosion. In general, the suspension is excellent, but requires investment at literally every MOT. If you run into problems, it will be very expensive to restore. The steering here is completely classic, with a rack and power steering. The rack is perfectly compatible with all designs. In any case, rails from E46 and Z3 are quite suitable for E46 and vice versa, which contributes to maintaining a high price for all used rails. Racks made by TRW and ZF are quite reliable. The power steering pumps are also strong, if you sometimes change the oil and do not pour synthetics again. By the way, cars with inline sixes have their own pump. It doesn't like dirty oil and there are no good alternatives to it. Take care of it. Of the minuses. With low-profile rubber, the resource of the tips is frankly small, and the rails on powerful versions by 15 years of operation often require repair due to backlash. In addition, you must very carefully monitor the serviceability of the antennas of the rack. The location of the latter is such that the slightest violation of the tightness of the covers and the stem rusts. In almost all versions, the cardan shaft regularly requires attention. The rubber metal coupling and its centering sleeve are consumables with a resource of 30 to 50,000. The bearing of the suspension support also does not run for very long, and the spline sometimes acidify, but not very. It is 220 to 150,000 kilometers. On the youngest diesel versions, a propeller shaft with two outboard bearings comes across. Oddly enough, complaints about the vibration of such a design are more common than usual. The gearbox leaks regularly, and the support that holds it to the rear subframe, there is one here, lasts about a year. Must be inspected and changed regularly so as not to twist the propeller shaft and the gearbox itself. At the same time, inspect the rear left silent block of the subframe. Due to the asymmetry of the load on the gearbox, the wear of the subframe mountings is similarly asymmetric. The rear left one suffers first. In neglected cases, because of this, it literally breaks out a piece of the body to which it is attached. The 5 and 6-speed manual gearboxes on these machines are just an example of quality and convenience for the driver. The disadvantages are only indirect. At high mileage, the wear of the mechanism makes working with the gearbox less convenient due to the wear of the shifting mechanism and the most loaded couplings. Well, there are oil leaks. The boxes get very hot and the air vents get clogged. In such situations, it easily squeezes out the oil seals. The most unpleasant feature is the widespread use of dual-mass flywheels at BMW. They are equipped with all engines, both petrol and diesel. Moreover, on gasoline, the design usually serves less. The flywheel itself is simpler there. The price of a part is 900 to 1,100 euros. The price of repairs is from 250 and more. which is comparable to the price of repairing another automatic transmission. We can say with some certainty that the GM box went all retired inline fours as well as 303rd, 320th, and all-wheel drive 325 or 330xi on other modifications. It is possible to which manufacturer's automatic transmission is installed on the car only by VIN. You can also visually check the shape of the pellet. ZF will have it steel and almost smooth, while GM will have it aluminum with ribs or plastic. However, in terms of resource, both 5-speed gearboxes are equivalent, with a slight advantage of GM in a clean resource due to less of oil pollution. They both pass the 250 to 300,000 before overall almost with a guarantee, but ZF is more driver-oriented and switches faster. However, its wear on the blocking lining of the gas turbine engine is more intense, and it is better to change the oil more often. Otherwise, there will be problems with the yellow line pressure solenoid and subsequent problems with wear on the mechanical part. GM wears out more evenly, and basically the resource is limited by friction, wear and pressure leaks due to wear and cracking of the rubber pistons of the bags. They are large here and are very afraid of overheating. In addition, GM tolerates high-speed spurs. The oil pump here is a pedal and, in such modes, wears out much faster than usual. In repair, both boxes are not very difficult, but the procedure is not cheap, especially if the box was traveled in an emergency condition and killed the pump, valve body and some elements of the planetary gear. For some 4-speed automatic transmission GM4L30 on cars with 4-cylinder engines before restyling, on the one hand even stronger than 5-speed ones, and on the other hand the pedal oil pump here really does not like high revs and dirty oil, and the electronics do not know how to turn off the automatic transmission in time, allowing the driver to finish off leaking or overheating. As a result, she usually arrives completely dead for repairs. Versions 325xi, 330xi and 330xd have permanent all-wheel drive, which is realized through the installation of a single-stage transfer case NV124 without locks and lowering and reduction of the front axle. Along the way, there are changes to the body, engine, and the front suspension is also very different. The razdatka itself is conditionally tonal. If the drive shafts are repaired in time and the vibrations of the front driver shaft is prevented, then it lasts longer than the car. But if you allow oil leaks, shaft vibrations, then there are chances that the bearings of the transfer case will be covered, most likely the front one. Usually everything ends well, just flushing, bulkhead and bearing replacement, but it can leave the housing and then it will have to be changed entirely. In this generation of cars, most of the engines are very strong, but traditionally for BMW, complex VKH systems, leaks of oil cups and very delicate radiators, which literally burst from the inside from excess pressure, are brought down. It is better to change the caps of the expansion tanks primitively. Of the common little things, there are still eternally thundering thermal housings on the exhaust system. They need to be welded. Most of the cars are equipped with 4-cylinder motors. Yes, many for some reason are sure that a real BMW should have 6 cylinders, but in fact it was inline 4s that forged the sporting glory of the company, and they should not be neglected. The first releases of E46 were equipped with the 4 1.9 series M43 TUB19 in 2 forcing options, for versions 369 and 318i until 2001. This is a simple 8-valve engine with a cast iron block and multi-point injection. From the strange, the presence of balance shafts, and from the high-tech, adjustable intake with DISA dampers and the secondary air system. Typical problems are oil leaks due to old gaskets untouched from the factory and a clogged or completely decomposed crankcase ventilation system (VCG), with missing hoses and clogged oil separator. Also evaluate the intake for holes and the camshaft for scoring. The piston usually wears out for runs of 350 to 400,000, although oil can start to be eaten with runs of through 150 plus, but then how lucky, and it depends on how to maintain it. The main problem is not breakage. It is too durable and foolproof. Most of all, they complain about the lack of power, and the E46 is very phlegmatic with it, if not worse. Well, if you twist in a ringing, then the resource of the piston group is noticeably reduced. The N40, N42, and N46 motors, which are found on cars after 2001 in several versions, are close relatives. The 369 was equipped with versions 1.6, N4B16, and N45B16, and 1.8, N42B18, and N46B18, with almost the same power output of 114 to 116 HP. The 318i versions were equipped with 2-liter N42B20, 143 HP, and N46B20, 150 HP engines. All of them are assembled in a common new aluminum block with cast iron liners, have 16 valve cylinder heads with phase regulators, double VANOS, and in all variants, except for N40 and N45, there is a Valvetronic throttle-free intake. The main problem is not only an increase in the complexity of the motors by an order of magnitude with approximately the same power compared to the M43, but also an increase in temperature. Despite the fact that there are many times more gaskets, plastic pipes, VKH is more complicated and the oil is hotter. As a result, these motors have started to eat oil since about 3 years, and now they are suffering with mild and main leaks of oil, antifreeze and failure of ignition coils. N46 engines have constant lambda regulation and, accordingly, constant errors in oxygen sensors, which cause problems in the quality of the mixture. In certain modes, it is too low or too rich. With runs of 150,000 and too rare an oil change, once every 15,000, all N-series engines have a chance of cranking the liners. The timing is quite problematic. Over time, it is simply break off the plastic timing chain dampers from old age, especially the upper one, and carries the remains around the system, clogging the oil receiver and breaking the oil pump. Phase regulator couplings here are not repairable, and they cost 400 euros each. The hydraulic chain tensioner does not differ in high reliability. It is necessary to install a new sample and make sure that the chain does not turn over. There are also a bunch of quick detachable fittings, plastic pipes, and in general, spare parts and gaskets for it are not cheap. As a result, any repair will result in an impressive amount. Against the general background, the motor's resource of all rubber bands seems like a trifle, especially the valve stem seals, which last 2 to 3 years. The piston group of N motors can go through 160 to 250,000 before severe wear, but more often the motor is finished off by lowering the oil level. And later versions do not even have dipsticks. On the N45 or N46 there is only a buggy electronic level sensor, or overheating. Temperature sensor cannot be trusted. Nominal 90 degrees can actually mean both 80 and 120, because the sensor walks through the electronics of the dashboard and filters the readings. A cold thermostat could solve most of the problems, but buyers of old and dead BMWs are still confident that the factory knows better how to make motors, and then do it accordingly to the factory. As a result, overalls every 120 to 200,000 mileage and the general dead state of the cars. Well, the fuel consumption is even higher than that of the M43. A faulty engine still eats more fuel than a relatively higher serviceable one. In terms of dynamics, the advantages are also not noticeable, and it's a shame that 1, the restyled version of the 320i, there is just the N42 or N46 engine with a capacity of 150 horses, while on the pre-styled 320 there was a wonderful M55 TUB20, about 6 cylinders and very reliable. The E46 was much more fortunate with inline sixes. Before restyling, motors of the N52TU series were installed, and after the M54 series, both series are not bad, although they have their weak points. M52TU, which are available in 20.0, M52 TUB20 150 HP variants for 320i up to 20.01, 2.5 M55 TUB25 170 HP for 323i and 2.8 M52 TUB28 193 HP for 328i, an aluminium block with cast iron sleeves. No Nicosil, which was on just M52 without TU. The timing drive is a thick chain. In the case of the M52, it is really tonal. 24 valves, hydraulic lifters, VANOS, phase regulators at the inlet and outlet, steel exhaust manifolds, an excellent in general engine of the Minesis, classic oil glasses leaks, breakdowns of DISA valves at the inlet, knocking vanes, and gentle hydraulic lifters. Well, to the hip VKG breakdowns, the already mentioned swollen radiators, breakdowns of the intake manifold corrugation, and top cover leaks. There are no problems with the repair. All the main troubles are eliminated relatively inexpensively, except that it will not be possible to save on hydricas. Even analogs from INA will be expensive. Total resource easily exceeds 500,000 kilometers. There are cars with runs and under a million. True, the chances of an oil burner after 200 to 250,000 mileage are quite high, and the reason may not be in the occurrence of the rings, but in their wear, if the drivers often operated the engine at high speeds. When buying, you should not relax. In practice, they kill the motor regularly and in various ways, and the control unit is not very advanced here. It does not always see a breakdown of the hardware of the motor. You will have to look with your eyes and feel with your hands. Study carefully the sources of oil leaks and check the documents for repairs. On the M54, which is represented by the 2.2 M54B22 170 HP variants, for 320i after 2001, 2.5 M54B25 192 HP for 325i and M54B30 231 HP for the 330i. They tried to make the cylinder block even lighter. Its outer shroud was made of aluminum magnesium alloy, otherwise the changes at first glance are small. But in fact, the design of the intake has been changed. There are more successful phase regulator couplings, by the way they are perfectly repaired, and an adjustable thermostat. The latter is rather a minus. The operating temperature is higher, the chances of overheating are higher. The life of the radiators and gaskets is lower. There is a more advanced engine management system. It is more demanding on the operation of all units, from sensors to valves, but it reads all the troubles better. The biggest problem is with the oil pump and cannot be detected by the scanner. The oil pump start mounting bolt was unscrewed with runs of the order of 100, after which the oil pressure disappeared. Since factory assembled motors still come across, the problem remains relevant. Many of our owners ignore the official reworkable companies. From minor changes to the worst, the resource of the timing chain has become slightly less than that of the 52nd series. It now nurses more than 300,000 only in extremely phlegmatic drivers and in cars with automatic transmission. Well, the crankshaft damper pulley now has a resource of 100,000. Otherwise, the problems are exactly the same as in the M52. Diesel E46 in our area are few, and the bulk of them are cars with inline fours of the M47D20 series with a capacity of 116 HP and 136 HP. On pre-styling 318 or 320D and M47TU D20 150 HP or 320D after restyling. 6-cylinder machines with M57D30 and M57TU 184 HP and 204 HP. For the 330D model, a huge rarity for Russia. Motors in 136 HP on the version before restyling, M47D20 with a conventional injection pump VP44, and this is the main problem. The pump is extremely expensive and has many weak points in the design, both purely mechanical and with cooling of the electronic part, but there are cheap injectors and the motor itself is strong. However, the glow plug control unit often burns out, the crankshaft damper pulley has limited service life, and the VKG filter likes to clog, after which the oil presses from all the cracks, heat exchanger gasket leaks, and drive belt tensioner pulley problems are infrequent and are relatively easy to fix. The turbine is here with a vacuum drive of variable geometry dampers, and the system soars easily since there is a lot of soot from the running motors and the drive is weak. The EGR valve also suffers from soot, but is usually simply muffled. From purely operational aspects, the engine works roughly, starts poorly and heats up poorly in cold weather, and still does not pull on a cold one. The M47TUD20 already has a common rail injection system, pulls better, runs smoothly, but better designed swirl flaps were added to the number of problems. A very common problem on the machines of the first releases was the fall of the damper elements under the valves and into the cylinder, after which the engine was sent for emission. The design was quickly corrected, but so far the best solution is to remove the flaps. In practice, it has been noted that there is little sense from them, except at the smallest load. When driving on a cruise at a speed of about 60 km per hour, they save 300 grams of diesel fuel per 100. In real operation at variable or simply high loads, there is no difference at all. Another change, the geometry. The turbine now has an electric drive and it works better than a vacuum one. It sours less often and the motor reacts faster. The mechanical part is quite strong, and the motor, when forcing over 150 forces, requires increased attention to the liners. They can be cranked with overheated oil. On this, information about the problems of the BMW E46 is exhausted. If you know more or disagree with what you heard, I'm waiting for you in the comments.